So, hi, my name is Shannon Strain, and it's my pleasure to show a lovely, lovely invention by my friend Gail Yellen of Gail Yellen Patrice Designs. I'll have her website on this video, of course. She's come out with these units called Thread Fusion. And there are two versions of the Thread Fusion. And first of all, let me just tell you why we want Thread Fusion to begin with, and it's to work with our sergers in unique and decorative ways. And I'll have a little trunk show after my presentation here as far as the mechanics of this, just to kind of whet your appetite, because I always find seeing samples and what people can do with a serger, which is certainly for garment construction, using it with knit fabric, it works beautifully for the stretch that we all know and love, but the decorative uses of this serger is just amazing, and Gail's Thread Fusion certainly puts that over the top. As I just mentioned, there are two units. There's this larger unit here, and this unit is measuring 4.5 inches across. It's about 1 3/8 inches from the center where you would put the spool pin of the serger to the inside curve here. And the other unit, it's a smaller unit, and it measures 2 3/4 inches across. The reason why there's two different units is because although they do the same purpose as far as holding 1, 2, 3, or 4 decorative elements and allowing them to entwine as they go through one of your loopers. It also allows us, because of the two different modules, to fit them on a large variety of sergers. So this first one is really geared, like if you're using these mini cones, you can see that I can very easily fit for this. This is Floriani embroidery thread. And it's used for, of course, embroidery, but we can also use it in the loopers of our serger. In fact, many people feel they can only put one element through a looper, but I'm here to tell you that you can actually put multiple units or multiple elements through that eye of the needle. The issue is going to be that we don't want to make our serger strain, and we want to make sure that it is free flowing so that we get a good quality stitch, because again, even though we're doing decorative applications with the serger, the quality of the stitch still matters. Now, with the smaller of the two units, you can certainly put on a couple of mini king spools, and you can even go through and like maybe put on just something like this for good measure. You could probably even fit a third mini cool spool thread on that, but as you can see, it not only gets crowded, but I want to kind of bring this up. Do you see how at the edge of this, how there's a gap here? And what we don't want to have happen when we're serging is for this thread, as it's going up through the antenna, I'll show you on the serger in just a bit, we don't want that thread to pull down and get caught underneath here, which could of course alter the tensions, which we don't want. In fact, if you're using things like rayon threads in particular, they tend to be a little slippery. They're very beautiful, but as with most pretty things, you do have to put a little more effort to get them to use. And this is an example of something called a thread net. And this thread net, it is just it's just this webbing, as you can see here, that I can put over a rayon thread. So say, for instance, if this was a rayon thread, let me just use a different color. If this was a rayon thread, what I would do is I simply grab hold of the thread net like so, stick it through, and then what I like to do is I like to leave this part open enough that the thread can come out, and I leave this just tucked underneath enough so that it kind of captures anything that wants to spool down below. In fact, if I applied this so this was a little taller on the spool, do you see how the net starts to leave the base. And sometimes threads can actually work their way down and catch on the base there. So rule of thumb is just to bring this netting down just a bit so it covers underneath. And then of course you can put that on your thread fusion and party on. A couple of differences in addition to the size that I do want to point out. Do you see how this unit has a scalloped border around the sides? This is because, as you well know, on our serger we're generally using 2, 3, or 4 threads for general construction. If it's like a flat lock, a 3-thread narrow, 4-thread serge, etc. And so on our spool pins there are other threads that need to live, like the needle threads. And so if we have a spool pin that is on the serger now, do you see how that nestles in there? That was just pure genius on Gail's part to make something so it's large enough to hold the base of the mini spool pins, thread pins, and yet allows enough room for the adjacent or the neighboring spool pin on the serger to have room to work. You know, another big thing that's different, and this small one that I'm showing you, I believe Gail is also going to refer to this as a universal. Let me see if I can kind of show you that eye. Yeah, this might be best. Do you see how the eye where the spool pin comes through in the center of both of these devices? Do you see how the one here on my left, this is on the smaller of the 2 units, that it is larger than the one on the right? This will fit on most sergers that are not linear. I'll talk more about that in a bit. This will fit on the majority of sergers out there, so we would tend to call this a universal. A universal because in particular with our baby lock sergers, which I love those sergers, I own a Triumph myself, the base of that serger pin for the thread, it's actually wider than the tip. And so because it flares out, I want to be able to use to get this all the way down on the base of the unit. And there are ways that we can do this. I'll show you on the serger in just a bit, using such things as a spool coaster, which we'll show. One thing I do want to point out is if you look at the 2 units, as far as the pins are concerned, do you see how they kind of line up there? So the the spool pin distances are the same. It's just that the base is different. The other thing that's different about these bases is nothing like black on black, but let me see if I can kind of give a reflection here. Do you see how there are these 4 rubber, and just take my word for it, these are rubber. This base, it feels to me like more like an acrylic, hard. This is softer kind of rubber. And the thing I love about this is, I know Gail showed this on her video, but I've got to tell you, I'm not a weak person. I am really pushing on this thing. I got it to move a little bit, but this thing really sticks. And you really want that because you don't want, as you're serging and the thread is coming off 2, 3, or 4 spool pins, you don't want that unit vibrating or slushing around. On the smaller of the 2 units, as opposed to these separate little rubber feet, what Gail did is she designed this so now there is a rubber ring around the entire unit. Do you see how that is? I mean, I think that's remarkable. So instead of the 4 separate rubber pieces, it is a rubber ring. And so as I put this on the table, once again, I'm pushing on it. Even with that smaller footprint, there, I mean, you can see how my fingers are moving here. That thing is not moving. Unless you want it to, you can pick it up, of course. So I have here in front of us a variety of threads that work well on the serger. Now, all threads are not created equal, and thank goodness for that, because variety is certainly the spice of life. What I arranged for you from left to right are different gauges or weights of thread. And so, for instance, on my far left here, this beautiful variegated thread, this is by Madeira, and this is actually a 4 weight thread. The lower the number the heavier the thread. Just to kind of give you some idea, like if I'm an embroiderer, I'll generally use, say, a 40 weight. If I'm a quilter and I'm doing free motion quilting, I'm oftentimes like at a 50 or 60 weight. So again, the lower the number, the heavier the element. And although we can combine threads or use them as a single in the serger, the thing that we need to make sure that we're aware of is that there is something called physics, and whatever we put through the eye of the needle must fit comfortably. It must flow comfortably so you can get a successful embellishment. So here we have Katona, that is at a weight of 4. This is Madeira Decora. This is at a weight of 6. I use this a lot, absolutely a lot. It's called Glamour. And this is actually at a weight, I think that's a 12. No, excuse me, this is an 8. This is an 8. And we're getting now into a weight of 12. These are Sulkies, and Sulky at a 12, excuse me, at a 30 weight, and Sulky at a 12 weight. And then here we have Madeira thread, or Issacore, Robinson Anton. These are all very popular brands of embroidery thread, and for other reasons. This works beautifully on the serger. This is at 40 weight. And this little guy here, this is a Janome Kimono silk, excuse me, Kimono metallic. And that is at a, I believe this is at a 60 weight. It's a very thin thread. So if you can imagine, on Thread Fusion, we can take two elements and combine them and form something new and fabulous. But as I zoom in here, before I do, let me just point out these. These I've got from Gail Patrice's website, and again, the website is certainly going to be posted here on the video. But these are 12 weight collections, and so this one here, this one is called the Bayside Blooms. Love that, very beautiful. And then this was just simple eye candy. I used some of these threads on one of her fabulous tote bags that she makes on the serger. And so this, again, at a 12 weight, it's Wonderfill, and this is called Paint Box. But as you can see, you can get on Gail's website, as well as others, but on Gail's website, we have various color palettes that we can use for our serger projects. So as we get a little bit closer, let me just kind of zoom in here just a bit, because I want you to kind of get an appreciation of how different, like, this is, this at the 4 weight compared to, again, the 6 and the 8. You can see how the girth changes. And then here again we have the this again is at a 12 weight. This is 12 weight, and this one here is at a 30 weight. And then this guy here again, the 14 and the metallic. So a large variety of threads. You know, one of the things that I learned from Pam Massey, who's another great educator. Do you see this thread? This is a beautiful variegated Madeira thread, and this works lovely on the serger. But if I combined, let's say when I'm using this, like in, say, a rolled hem, the colors are maybe a little too vibrant, or it's having more of an impact than I want it to. What you can do is, with Thread Fusion, you can take two threads. All I did is I grabbed a similar thread from Madeira. These are beautiful rayon threads. And again, rayon threads tend to be a little slippery, so do make sure that you put that thread net on. But you can see that in the colorway, when I put this in here, it would kind of tone down that yellow. When I take this on my Thread Fusion, of course, and I'm putting these two cones on and working the magic that Thread Fusion provides me. So we're at the Baby Lock Triumph, and I took the spool stabilizer, looks like this, off of the spool pin. By the way, if ever you're taking regular cones of thread, like over here, off the spool, and you're wondering what happened to the thread stabilizer, turn the cone over and just make sure it's not stuck up underneath that. It happens all the time, and we certainly don't want to buy more of these if we don't need to. So they could well be hidden in your sewing room. So let me just get this back over here. And so what I have here is, this is the chain looper. And I'm going to be working with a cover stitch and using thread velvet, but you could certainly use this, say, in the upper looper as well. Generally speaking, for exposed work, I'm generally always putting things in the upper looper because that's generally on the quote-unquote right side of the project. But could you put things in the lower looper as well, especially if it's a reversible project like a scarf? And I would just say, you betcha you could. So the first thing I have here is, this is the beautiful large thread fusion with the original size hole that we could see here. And what I want to point out is, do you see, and let me just kind of zoom in here a bit because I think this is an important consideration. Do you see how, I'm going to tilt up just a bit. Ooh, okay. Do you see how this spool pin, do you see how it widens out? If you try to put this particular, the large fusion with the smaller hole, onto the spool pin, it does sit, but it does tend to teeter just a bit. It will sit. You could help stabilize it by using these thread spool coasters. And this is in your accessory box of your machine. It is a, not the accessory box, by the way, on the side of the machine. It's in the envelope that came with the machine. You can fit these in the accessory box. You know, this little guy here, right? Right. So this, you can put this underneath here, like such. And then this sits on top, and that adds more stability to this. Now, this, I do appreciate, again, her ingenuity, because regardless of where I have this on the machine, and let me kind of tilt over, and I'm going to tilt the camera up again and hopefully not make you dizzy yet again. Here we go. So do you see how I've got the mast here? This is why she's such a genius, that she cut the little, I'm going to call them like little flower petals out of here. So regardless of what pin I have this unit on, it allows for what's physically on the machine, okay? What's physically, and again, I wouldn't put the thread fusion in this configuration. It's a little too high off of the spool pin, but I just wanted to point out how the mast and the side of the thread fusion nestle in quite nicely. And that would be the same as if you had it, say, on a spool pin that had a thread on it. That little opening helps. Now, this universal one, I'm going to take the thread coaster off. The universal one, it's smaller in nature, but it has a larger opening. And so when I put this on the spool pin, and again, it is coming down just a bit. There we go. We can kind of once again see how it's tapered. So watch this. Isn't that genius? So again, it's all the way down on the sewing deck. It's very stable in that position, and the world is your oyster. And then we also have the rubber feet, so this is not spinning around freely. Because if it was acrylic on plastic, it may rotate a bit. So we would thread it with the different threads coming up through the mast, as you would imagine. And what I'd like to do now is show you how to use a thread cradle, because oftentimes, especially with machines that have air threaders, if the volume of threads or the number of elements gets to be too unwieldy, sometimes the air threader has a difficult time with it. And it's not because it's not working correctly, it's just that we want to do extra funk on our machine. And it is all about the creativity and the funk that we can achieve. So I'll be right back. So I opened the cover on my Triumph, Baby Lock Triumph, and I just want to show you that the thread fusion is on my machine. It's threaded up as we would normally thread up, so it goes through the looper there, and then through here, through here. If you needed to bypass the tension, these elements are thin enough that we're going to be fine, but if it's thicker threads, you would go through this element here. There's like a little opening here, and then bypass through here. So what I want to show you is how just to thread it standard wise using the jet air threader. So as you all know, on the Baby Luck Sergers, we're going to go ahead and push this to the threading position. We'll then turn the hand wheel till the loopers lock, and they have. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take a thread cradle. And what I created here, this I'm using like a 30 weight thread. Because again, you can, this'll thread through just fine. I find that sometimes people use really lightweight threads and then they have issues with this. So like maybe the thread cradle would break. There's actually a wire thread loop fisher that you can put through the machine. It is in the accessory pouch. I have never used it. But it's there in case I ever did. I need to cut enough length of this thread that will go through the tensioning system fine. And so, as you all know, I'm just going to put this into the chain looper here. I think you can see, yes. And so I'm just putting that through like such. And let's see. You go in like that. And then as I feed this through, do you see how I gave myself like enough slack? Here's the secret sauce. I put a loop on the end of that. Let me see if I get a different kind of background so you can see a bit easier. You know, so there's like a loop on the end of this. Then I'm going to take these little elements, two threads, through that cradle. So let me go ahead and do this. Here are the two elements. Here is my thread cradle. I put one through the other like such. And then I'm going to come over here just to the side of the machine, because right here is my looper thread. And because I don't need the air threading anymore because it's already threaded, so I'm just going to take this and pull, and this will come through the machine just like such, and so it's threaded. So that's like the basic how you would thread for any threads. Generally you leave like about an inch or two in this little compartment here. This is excess. That can just stay there and party. And then I'm going to go ahead and close the side panel here. And let's go ahead and close this up here. This up here, I'm going to put this back over to serging. And this down here like such. And then I'm going to come over here. And one of the things you want to kind of be aware of is, again, the two elements I have here, they're both 40 weight threads. So the stitch length is where I'm going with this. If you're using, like say a 12 weight thread, like a heavier weight thread, you're going to want to lengthen that stitch up, like maybe a 3.5, 4, just so that you give that heavier element breathing room to sit on the project. With something like this, I'm thinking like a 2.5 is going to be pretty good. And so let me just grab something to stitch on and put this underneath. By the way, the presser foot I have on this machine, this is a cover stitch foot. It's a little narrower than the general purpose foot. You can use the general purpose foot, but I certainly like when I'm doing cover stitch to use the smaller foot for hems, all those types of things. So I just love the fact that Baby Lock gives us a lot of variety in feet. I'm just going to put the differential to normal. It's on. Everything else is set fine. And of course, I'm going to bring this on down here, and let me just put pedal to the metal and just kind of see some of this. And by the way, before I start stitching, as we may recall, it's the pretty cover chain looper that we want to see. So I'm just going to flip this upside down. This is also pretty, but I want it to be on that radiance fabric. And so let me go ahead and stitch a little bit with this. And then I'll go ahead and just release that looper and bring this up, pull this over to the side, and you can see how gorgeous that is. Oh my gosh. Let me just kind of come in here a little bit closer so you can you can gather all the beauty that is there before you. So this is actually blending in. It's a peach color, and I'm going to say kind of a light rose color together, and it does just a beautiful job. Again, later on I'm going to show you some projects with this. What I want to show you next is kind of the same thing, again on the baby lock, but I want to show you how to bypass the air threading and using that with maybe some heavier elements on that wonderful Thread Fusion by Gail Yellen. So we're back. I still have my 30 weight thread that I used for my last thread cradle. Some of you might not know how to do this, so I thought I would show. So here you got like a strand of thread. I take my 2 fingers in through like such. So I'm just taking this 2 fingers down. Let me get a little more. 2 fingers down. I reach in, grab the thread here, and pull across. And then that gives me the loop here where I can hook other elements into it. Hey, speaking of elements, let me kind of go up here. So this is fancy camera work, i.e. I'm holding the tripod. So now we have the large thread fusion by Gail Yellen. And as you can see, I have 3 wonderful things. They're all variegated. Oh my gosh, 2 of them are silky. One of them is a 12 weight, one of them is a 30 weight, and then I got a Robinson Anton variegated, which is at a 40 weight. So 3 different weights of thread. Yes, I think it might be illegal in certain states, but here in Pennsylvania, I think we can go for it. So the threads are coming up. It's coming up into the antenna just as before. It's coming down through the guide that I showed you. I pulled the threads. You can see I'm like at a setting of 2, which is a relatively light tension. If I found that there was too much resistance just by gently pulling, and you'll know by feel, then again I can always take that optional guide here and bypass the tension. But I can use the tension even with these lovely elements. I'm going to go ahead now. Let me just back this up a bit here, and I'm going to open up the machine here. So first thing I want to do is, again, from the tension, I didn't go through the port here. I went through this. You see how it's like upper looper, lower looper, and this is the chain or cover stitch looper. And so I'm through this port, which lines me up to go into the mechanism down here. I still need to put the thread cradle through the mechanism so it's oriented correctly here, but let me just show you what the difference is. So I have this closed. I need to turn the hand wheel to line up all the planets. Jupiter does align with Mars, and then I'm going to come over. Yes, you can see that. I'm going to come over here just as I did before. I'm going to take a little tail of the lasso in through here. I'm going to push the button, and it is going to go through there like no one's business. Yes, I'm just going to double check. Let's march over to this side of the machine. Yes, there's thread in here, so I'm golden. Here's the difference. Here's the difference. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the loopers. And this element here, it's going to need to go across here. There's like a little metal bridge here, which is so smart. So it protects the machine. And I need to go down through here and into the mechanism. It's like this. How am I going to get to where I need to be? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just grab either a tweezer or a closed scissor and just pull out a little bit of this thread. Do you see how I'm doing? I'm going to get my little fingers in there and pull the rest of this out. Let's see here. Need a good sight here. And then I'm going to grab this, pull this through. So here it comes. Just want to make sure you're pulling from the correct side. And then lo and behold, here's that little loop. You know, in class I always tell the students, everyone now say, ooh, ah, here's the loop. So I'm going to come here now, and as opposed to just 2 40 weight threads we did in the first exercise, here we have 3 elements that we're going to go ahead and put through this looper like such. Just like this. Now this time it doesn't have as far to go, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm opening up the side door here. Just over there is where I am. And then I'm going to take hold of the thread cradle, and I'm going to pull. Do you see how this is coming through? And I'm going to pull it out till it comes out through here. And you can see how, do you see how it's through the outside now? So that is certainly also an ooh-ah. And you can see once again how Baby Lock just makes their machine so good. You see how the plastic kind of gives away here, so it allows a free pass here. I'm going to go ahead and just cut, like again, just a couple of inches off the side, put it into the basket on the side there, and close the door. Now, if I had a drum, I would begin to do a drum roll here, because this is where things can get exciting. So I'm closing up the machine here. I'm coming back over to the foot, and I'm going to put in, and we'll just go ahead and use the same fabric. I'm going to flip it upside down, put it underneath the foot. I want in this case, because it's a little heavier, I want to go ahead and I'm going to turn it up to like a 3 and see how that works. This is where we do the trial and error. Or I should say the trial and trial, because sometimes we think it's an error and it was the best thing that happened to us that day. So I'm going to go ahead and begin to stitch. And as it's stitching, you can see, let me just come up to the thread fusion. You can see how it's coming off of the spools. Yes, lovely, lovely, lovely. Let's come back down here. Hope I'm not making you too dizzy. There we go. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it the opposite way just to release my chain looper, bring this up like so, pull this out like such, and admire the goodness that is thread fusion. So let me come and give you a little close-up here. I'm going to bring this in and bring this down a bit more. Just something like that. Here we go. And so you can see how impressive that is. And you can see how the colors change, etc. What I oftentimes will do if I'm taking a couple of different thread colors, I'll actually take the different threads like this. I'll like pull these guys, and then what I'll do is I'll take the threads and kind of twist them over themselves just to kind of get a preview of what they would look like. And all I can say is gorgeous, gorgeous. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop here. I'm going to just show you a couple of samples of things I've done with sergers over the years, just to kind of whet your appetite of different ways we could use the thread fusion. So this was a project that Nancy Zeman had. She is duly missed. It was simply using, I shouldn't say simply anything, it's just magical. Here we have some pontine knit, and we're just finishing it with a rolled edge on the side. We cut slits into the orange as well as into the yellow, and then we just weave these other strips that are also treated with a rolled edge on either side. And isn't that fun how it ends in a cord just through in and out like such. And also a nice little scarf. This little scarf has got to be at least 12 years old, but it's an oldie, it's a goodie, it works. So Serger magic. Pam Massey, appreciate her genius. This was one of her books that she did with Nancy, and I love her magical serger table runner. I've made it so many times, did several classes on that, and everyone just enjoyed the genius that Pam is. And so here we have just one of the examples. Look how you can, again, this is kind of a weaving type of thing where we're using the glamour thread in the upper looper thread, right? And so this is just woven in and out, so you can kind of see, I can put my little chopstick through here, so it's woven. That's lovely. This is using some flat locking technique. Let me see if I can zoom in, because this is a little busy here. But do you see how I'm using a flat lock technique, and you could use it with that thread fusion unit. You could put several different colors all at once, so it would actually change and be even more dramatic than it already is. And then we just feed a ribbon through, going over 3 fibers or threads and down 3 threads. These are the ladder stitches of a flat lock. And so that is just another great technique. Pam, thank you so much for that. I've enjoyed teaching this class. I enjoy your skill. These thread fusion units, I have had so much fun playing with. They are definitely in my tool of tricks now, thanks to Gail. And again, the fact that I can put so many different elements now through the looper and just get additional effects that was not possible before. So appreciate you guys' time, and hopefully you learned a thing or two. And by all means, I look at the comments. If there's any questions, please reach out. Take care. Bye for now.